Hello, welcome uh, to the first session of Intermediate Vector Graphics. This is a fun class. I'm the instructor, John C. Brady, but I go by JC. It's a pretty current photo there. The best way to get a hold of me is to actually respond to that welcome email that I sent out, or you can just type it in, john.brady@independence.edu, and we'll start things out that way. That's the best way to contact me if you have any issues. So today we're going to do a class overview. So just go over the whole class and talk about what's coming up. Then we'll take a little break. Continue with a week one overview. So we'll focus a little bit more on the week one work, which is going to be a gradient mesh. I'm not sure if you've worked with those in Illustrator, but you can create some pretty complex looking realistic objects with that gradient mesh tool. So that's a fun one. We'll be actually creating a whole label for a can of fruit. So we're going to be using a lot of different Illustrator features, and some of the more advanced ones, even though this is a intermediate vector course, I consider some of those tools that we're going to be using a lot of to be a little more advanced, but that's good news. I mean, I think that's part of the fun of it is getting into some of those more advanced tools. So anyways, that's coming up. This is kind of the format of most of our classes, though. On Tuesdays, I'll do sort of an overview or a review of week one, plus overview of the work that week. And then on Wednesday's session, I'll tend to do a demonstration. So it's more or less the format. But let's go into the announcements here. So we'll briefly go into that just so we can familiarize ourselves with that. So the class format, I already mentioned, just Tuesday, Wednesday. That's really what we'll be doing. It's really important, if you can't make it to the classes, to at least watch the recordings, because that's how you're going to know, especially on Wednesday's session, how to put the current work together for that week. I don't mean to say, do it exactly like me at all, but it's just giving a demonstration so that you have a better understanding of what's expected on that assignment/assessment. I'll go over anything that's necessary or anything that seems to need more demonstration. And, sometimes even the discussion might need a little bit of demonstration, but usually it's just the assignment, sometimes the assessment, on rare occasion the discussion. But you can always send me an email if you're confused about any aspect of the work that week, and I'll always go over it in the demonstration day. So know that you can do that any week. You could even look through the class and ask about it now. I think that's a pretty good idea, but we're going to review the whole class today. I think it's a good idea to go through on your own, though, and kind of look at things, and starts to get the mind thinking, generating ideas, and looking at what's ahead is helpful for that. But it also helps keep us from getting kind of blindsided, so we know what to expect a little bit more. I think even though we'll go through it today, it's something I encourage everyone to do on their own. Is just review every class and look at everything before actually, taking it week by week can be kind of stressful sometimes. But so it helps to really see what's ahead of you. So I always like to recommend that people just jump through and look at all the upcoming coursework for the whole mod. So with that in mind, if you do run into any situation where you need help on anything, extra help, we have the Learning Center, of course, but Christy Paulson is the main learning coach that's designated to this class. And so she communicates with me a little bit more. She's a little bit more familiar with the coursework and the needs of students in this specific course. So I recommend Christy Paulson more than the Learning Center. The drawback to that is that she only has Wednesday and Thursday this week from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. and from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. So she works part-time Wednesday, Thursday this week. And you'll find that her schedule, for the most part, will stay the same, but sometimes changes a little bit. So if you can get in to see her, I recommend her first for this class. Maybe include, she does writing as well as the design aspect, but she can definitely help you with projects and maybe trying to get that gradient mesh figured out. Because it's, like I say, there's some kind of advanced tools that we'll be using in this class, and they may not come to you right away. You're going to have some trial and error, and I think a lot of it will be spending some time with it. But I think when people are rushed too much to try to finish up their work, they run into some problems, or they tend to, with, kind of stressing themselves out by saying, oh, I got to get this project done, rather than kind of just spending time with the tool and having fun and learning it. And, even going through on Google or YouTube and just looking up gradient mesh tutorials in your spare time can be really fun, really enjoyable, and it will teach you how to use the tool, which really the gradient mesh is, for example, and even the 3D tool and some of these others that we'll be using a lot of in this class, they take a little while to learn, so don't expect yourself to get it first try. Especially don't stress yourself out more if you're running into this I got to learn it kind of attitude, and soon you'll find you're just stressed out trying to get this project done. But I think if you try to have fun with it, delve into it on your own, like I say, just doing some extra work outside the course and just looking up gradient mesh tutorials or something like that on YouTube / I don't know, also Vimeo's another one. And you can just do it as a general web search and Google or something. But getting some practice on your own can not only be fun, but it will help you significantly in learning this tool. I think that we only have so much time in the classes, and we'll definitely cover it here, but know that a lot of these tools, they just you don't get it right away, and they come over time. So you got to spend that little bit of extra time with them. So if you have that extra time, I'd encourage you to not only see Christy Paulson or the regular Learning Center, who's actually available at, well, a lot more regular hours. As you know, they work a full schedule from Monday to Friday. They're always available. Well, not after midnight. I think they open at about 9 a.m. or something like that, MST, Mountain Standard Time. But there's always help available. I think I would say recommend Christy, but also recommend doing some additional web searches on your own, finding some extra help on some of those tools, because I think that's what's needed, is just spending some extra time and letting yourself know that a lot of the mastery of those tools is just going to take some extra time. But yeah, lynda.com is a great resource, absolutely. I think they can be yeah, I think they're really good generally, and breaking down the various tools in Illustrator. You can find, I don't know. So you had a hard time. Lori was mentioning that she had a hard time finding a mesh specific mesh tool. Is that what you had a failure on lynda.com with? I think specific tools sometimes, yeah, I think sometimes specific tools on Lynda are hard to find. Like, they're easier to find on like a YouTube search, for example. I don't know if Lynda got acquired by LinkedIn, and I'm sure they're probably getting a little bit better. I think you can search for mesh tool, gradient mesh tool on Lynda, and you might have decent results. You might try that. But boy, YouTube I find is an amazing resource as well. Lynda's videos, yeah, obviously are a little bit more professional, well put together, but they're not always the best resource. They're certainly not the only resource. So, consider those extra resources for help, not just the school, but even outside of the school. There's plenty out there. So, yeah, it's good if you're you're constantly on the lookout for new tutorials and just, doing that for fun. I know I used to do a lot more of that for fun, but that was a way that I think I learned Photoshop and Illustrator the most, was doing tutorials and just creating, cool things and fun things that I like to create. So, uh, yeah, it's important to get that extra kind of push by finding your own interests, and just doing some extra searching outside of class. Just being patient with yourself and knowing that you're not going to learn a lot of this stuff right away. It'll take some time, um, but there's always help out there if you need it. So if we don't have time in class, there's plenty that we'll cover in class. In fact, I want to cover everything I can in class, but don't hesitate to use some of those other resources that are out there. All right, so let's go through kind of the week by week on the class. We've got, as you know, 3 things every single week. We've got, probably used to the format of the classes in general now. We've got the discussion, the assignment and assessment every week. This week, the discussion is on advanced color management. For discussions, I'll go over this really just today, and then I won't really mention it anymore. But it's in a 300 level class. Main post needs to be 200 plus words and 2 APA citations. I don't always grade on too much on citations, but consider that this is what's graded unless I say otherwise in the session. So sometimes having 2 citations may not be totally necessary, but let's just treat that this week so far as if it is. Sometimes when we're sharing things like our own sketches and things like that, that's some example of why it wouldn't be necessary. You might want 1, but maybe 2 might be a little overkill, or sometimes even none. But consider that APA citations and the 200 words, consider that to be something that's there unless I mention otherwise. You'll have to hit that mark as far as getting 100% on the grade if that's what you're after. And a lot of people forget this, is that the 2 follow-up posts worth 50-word posts to fellow students. It can be something if you ask the how and the why, especially the why. So it's like, well, I really liked your post. I really liked that image that you sent. Well, think about that. Why did you like it? And how is it a good post? How is theirs a good post? Asking yourself that why should easily generate 50 words. So, I liked it is not quite what we're after, especially in this upper level class, the 300 level class. So the standards are a little bit higher, 200 words and 2 APA citations and 2 follow-up posts of 50 words. That'll get you 100% on every discussion, so long as the writing is good. Sometimes I'll notice students that have a little issue with writing. That's fine, but make sure that while you're here, you do get some help with that, because employers will expect you to know how to write, at least on a basic college level. They're going to expect that, and you, even as a designer, will have to do that sometimes as you're working for various places. So there is that resource available here. Like I say, Christy Paulson and the Learning Center, as well as our own Writing Center that you can access through Shark. Those resources are available to help you, but you need to make sure to use them. And if I ask you to get some extra help with the discussion this week, that's fairly common. I see it a lot of problems with student writing. They need to be up to a college level standard, and that's because you're training to get a job. So you need to have, employers will have a certain expectation that you know how to write, and you'll have that every now and then. You'll mostly be doing design as a graphic designer, but you'll also have to write. I always had to, and you want to come across professionally in your writing. So very important that you use those resources that you have available to you, and get that help especially if I get that help if you think you need it, number one. But if you don't think you need it, and I mentioned that in your grade feedback, don't take it the wrong way. That's what you're here for. You're here to improve and learn, right? So it's not such a big deal. We want to just address. Well, don't take it as the wrong way is what I mean. It's like we're here to learn, so use those resources that we have available to learn at the school. And the Writing Center is one of those resources that isn't used very much. So I want to encourage that with everyone, but especially if I offer you feedback on the discussion. And they'll actually tell me whether or not you went to see them. So make sure to do that if I offer you feedback, and know that you'll need to have those writing skills up to par by the time you graduate and are looking for work. Employers are just going to expect that. So anyways, this is the requirement. I believe it's posted on all discussions, reply requirements, which I like. That's a great thing. You can always just come down here for review. Try to get your first post up, of course, by Wednesday. I don't always grade on that, but I'm supposed to grade on whether or not your first post is up by the end of the day on Wednesday. So things to know with every single discussion. Anyways, so this one's on color management. We'll be talking a little bit about that. Adobe Capture. Capture is an app that is installed on your mobile device. Capture is used to pull colors, patterns, shapes from photos that you snap on your mobile device, or stock photos that are pulled from the web. You can use Capture to create the following: shapes, patterns, colors, brushes, looks. So this is kind of a neat feature. I think there are other options as well. I don't know. Plenty of different other options that maybe you're used to using. If you haven't tried Adobe Capture, maybe try that one out. It's a good excuse to try it out. That's what we'll be talking about on the discussion this week. So moving into the assignment, so we'll be talking about meshes, gradient mesh. I don't know if you've used this one, but like I say, it's one of these tools that takes a little while to master it. You'll see that you'll get results right away, but in order to get the results that you're after, it's going to take some time, and you'll have to play around with it a bit. And like I say, YouTube, Google, Vimeo, some of those other Lynda, some of those other websites will help you if you're having a hard time getting it right away. And just know that you will have a hard time getting it right away. I think that in itself is helpful, because don't expect that it's going to happen just like that. It's one of those more difficult tools to get a hold of, but we'll work with that a little bit more after the break today. We'll come back and do a little bit more review on the week 1 work. And of course, tomorrow I'll do a demonstration of the week 1 work, so we'll work even further with that. But hopefully you realize that probably this class will be a good start, but maybe, like I say, not quite enough to master that tool. You're going to have to spend a lot of time with it. Always doing some other searches is going to be really helpful to you there. So just know that, and I think this first one can be helpful to you. So anyways, we'll be working with fruit. So you'll be looking up a piece of fruit. I won't go too into this. We'll come back to it. But think about the end product that you'll be creating. During the course of this mod, we'll be creating a label for a can of fruit. So picture whatever sort of fruit. Picture a label on a fruit can, and what would that fruit illustration look like? And maybe it's more than just one piece of fruit. One piece of fruit might be a start, but a lot of times you might want several, because look at some other labels and what are you after on as far as what you see out there? How does that inspire you? What what might you be after for your own label? Because a lot of times, it's not just concentrating on the fruit, but where's the rest of the project, how it integrates. I like that it's broken up over the course of a mod, and we kind of assemble the different pieces at the end of this. But asking yourself things, for example, like, do I just want one peach on there, or do I want multiple peaches, or do I want a whole cornucopia of different fruits? And it's like a fruit medley or something. Asking yourself that now might be a good idea. Maybe doing some sketches and try to figure out maybe what you have in mind for that overall label. But we're going to break this down into individual parts every single week. And this week we're just going to create the fruit, so the illustration that's on that label. So we'll be using that gradient mesh tool that makes some really good realistic looking objects in Illustrator. So the other thing this week will be a quiz, and I won't go over that too much, but I will say that the most important aspect of this is to in order to prepare for this quiz, go into here, readings and videos, and make sure that you are well familiar with all of this. So you watch Practicing with the Mesh Tool, you've watched Core Concepts on the lynda.com access, because that's I don't, there's not a whole lot here. It's less than 2 hours, but this is what's going to allow you to do well on the need to go back here on the assessment quiz. And sometimes the quizzes are set up in a way that they try to trick you a little bit. So even if I, being familiar with the mesh tool, went in and took this quiz, I'll bet you I wouldn't do too well. I would actually have to go in and watch all of this, because they will say specific stuff in these videos that tests you to make sure that you did in fact watch and or read anything that was essential to this week one reading and videos. So make sure you press that tab right there. It's that button, Readings and Videos, and do week one before you go in and do the test. And that anytime there's any quiz or test like that, they call it a quiz, I call it a test sometimes, but just know that you're gonna have some trick questions, a lot of them. And if you just ignore all this stuff and just go in and do it, you're probably not gonna do very well. Me, even knowing the mesh tool somewhat, probably would not do very well. In fact, I've taken some of these quizzes and it's like, whoops, I know that I have to go back and watch these videos. That's how it's set up. They're trying to get you to watch these videos. It's really not that long. It's about, a little more than an hour and a half worth of watching, and it ought to familiarize you with the mesh tool pretty well. And this is all on lynda.com access. So it ought to give you a pretty good start going through this, but make sure that you do it before you get in and take your assessment. So if you do that, you'll do pretty well. And that said, even those questions can be difficult. I think a lot of them are tricky. If you don't get 100% on it, don't worry about it. Know that you can always make it up on those daily checkpoints. Remember, there's 60 points extra credit in this class through just doing the daily checkpoints every day. So, if you blow it on one of those checkpoints or on the quiz and the answers, maybe a little bit weird, don't worry about that too much. Know that you can always, by staying engaged with the class, easily get an A. So, yeah, the quizzes are tough. And Lori's mentioning that she got an A in her last class, but not so good on any of the quizzes. I don't think a lot of people do well, and I've taken them without watching all the content, and yeah, I don't do too well. But they're just designed to trick you a little bit and make sure that they're really designed to make sure that students watch those that course learning week 1, week 2, every the week's learning exercises. And sometimes you'll see, let's see, I don't see any here, but sometimes there'll be blog posts. these are all Linda videos. So I don't know, week 3 looks like a web page like help.adobe.com, and sometimes there'll be articles on the web. Sometimes this is all like the Adobe Help Center, but make sure to do that in addition to watching the course, those weekly videos and readings, and that's where you'll find the answers specifically to those quizzes. All right, so week 2 discussion, vector art in logo design on the discussion. So we're talking about that. Pretty much all logos are going to be in vector. A lot of times clients will bring a pixel-based, raster-based image to you and expect you to work with it, and you'll have to say, well, this has to be recreated in a vector format so that it's more versatile and can be used correctly or properly in just about any format. So talking a little bit about vector art in logo design next week too. And this is interesting, creating custom types. So we're actually going to be creating a font in this class, which is awesome. I've never actually done it this way. This is a website. Where was the website that they recommended? I guess maybe it's part of this. So you'll be partly creating in week 2, creating a font in Illustrator, and then taking your font then onto this website called fontastic.me. I've actually never used it, so that's a new one for me. I've made some fonts before with other software, but I've never used this particular one. So this should be interesting. It should be fun. Get a chance to actually make your own letters, make your own font. So I think that's pretty cool. But that's in week 2. That's coming up here. So that's a first, really. I haven't seen that done before in any of the classes. So anyway, week 3, the discussion about memory issues, maximizing memory that you have in Illustrator. Go through, RAM. A lot of times you'll run into this. This operation cannot be completed because there isn't enough RAM available. Probably some of you have had that message on your machines before. Certainly it's not fun to get. We'll talk about some things we can do there in order to help maximize potential with Illustrator. So week 3 assignment, we'll be doing the label on the fruit can. So we'll actually be creating that label with a bleed and adding a custom pattern to it, nutrition facts, hopefully using that new type that you created on the week 2 assignment. Things like that. If you really hated your typeface that you created and you wanted to use a different font, things like that are usually fine with me. But it encourages you rather than to use that font that you created. So I would encourage you rather than say you have to use it. But it's kind of interesting to me, anyways, how you'll be using every aspect of what you build to create this label on the fruit can. So it's kind of cool. So anyways, moving into week 3 assessment, you'll actually create a can for that label to sit on. We'll be using Illustrator for that. It's fairly easy. If you haven't used that drawing tool or 3D, this here, the 3D tool within Illustrator in the effects panel, you can extrude, revolve, do one other option too. I can't remember. We could look at that. Let's see. It's in the effects menu, 3D, extrude, revolve, and rotate. So you got 3 choices there. But this is a tool that's been in Illustrator for a long time. Notice it can be a little bit buggy when you're using it, but you can create some neat stuff with it. And we'll be using that to create the can, make a realistic looking can for this week 3 assessment that we'll put the label on. So lots of fun in this one, I think. Presentation comps for week 4 discussion will be showing what we might create to show the client, kind of like mock-ups, but we'll be creating them. So here we'll actually use the 3D perspective grid in Illustrator. I don't know if you've ever used that one before. Another tool that I would say takes a little time to master it. And I think if you have some experience on your own with perspective and know how perspective works, this one you can appreciate quite a bit. I think a lot more if you already understand perspective. But this tool is an interesting one that it basically allows you to build your own perspective scenes or your own objects, or make typography three-dimensional. So it's one of those tools that takes a little while to get the hang of, I think, but it's a fun one. It's certainly a useful one at times. Anyways, we'll be using that here in week 4 for the assignment, and creating our own mock-up based on that fruit can that we created and the label we created. So we'll be kind of mocking up a little bit of a world with that, with this 3D environment, this tool here. All right, so week 4 we'll have another quiz. Make sure it's same thing. Make sure that you're watching all of those videos, reading any sort of recommended websites or articles or blog posts that they direct you to, and you should do okay on this. Again, if you don't get 100%, don't worry about it too much. Very, very few people do. It's almost like 1%, if that, of students, like 1 out of 100. Maybe not that little, but I swear it's like one. I think last class for the quiz, I think there was like 1 or 2 50s throughout the whole class. So, or 50 out of 50, So anyways, they're hard questions, no doubt, on all of those tests, all those quizzes. All right, week 4, also career integrations, worth 15 points. Just ask you to review the class and talk about what you found that you liked in the readings and lectures and assignments, what you liked and why. 50-word answers, that's what it expects, but don't miss out on that 15 points. It's an easy 15 points. Just let us know what you thought about the class. So there's generally 3 things every single week, so that the course format stays pretty familiar to you. There's the discussion, the assignment, and the assessment. Then in week 4, there's just this extra career integration that it kind of robs points from the quiz, where this one's only worth 35 and most of the quizzes are worth 50. But sometimes I wish they would take out career integration because I don't know. I think sometimes we've seen that one long enough. But anyways, that's just my personal opinion. But it's there. You might as well know that it's there and get the extra 15 points by filling that out. That's week 4. So week 4, it differs in that that they've got that one kind of feedback career integration to consider. All right, anyways, that's an overview of the whole class. Why don't we take a 5-minute break, our first break here. I like to do 2 5-minute breaks and kind of recoup a little bit, think about it, and then we're going to revisit week 1, and we'll talk about really specifically the gradient mesh tool, and we'll work with that a little bit. All right, so let's do 5 minutes, and we'll see you in 5. All right, welcome back. Make sure I'm sharing the screen here. All right, there we go. All right, so mesh tools. We'll talk now a little bit more in detail about the week 1 assignment, working with meshes. That's what I'll focus on mainly in the demonstration tomorrow. So you working with meshes, we can make some really complicated looking objects. We'll get at least an overview today, because that's what I like to do on Tuesday's sessions. Just talk about, give a brief breakdown of what the coursework will be. So we're going to go over and make a few mesh objects in Illustrator. We won't make anything very complicated. We'll get a little bit more complicated in the demonstration tomorrow. So I'll actually put together my version of what I'll be creating for this class as an example. And obviously, you know, you can see those demo days as just an example. You can, if you feel like you want to copy mine, you can, but I would encourage you, especially in the higher level classes, to do your own, because copying, it's not like there isn't any good use for that, but and we definitely want to move into the more creative aspects where you're coming up with your own solutions, your own visuals, rather than just copying what I'm doing or copying what someone else is doing. So anyhow, know that what I show isn't intended to be copied, but just to give you some basic reference on what the expectation for the assignment would be. But anyways, I'll get into more detail tomorrow. Today we just want to, I think, take a look at the mesh tool and just get a feel for it. And I just encourage you now to even play along with me and use the mesh tool when you're just play around with it a little bit and look at it as something that you're going to have to play around with it in order to understand it, and that it's going to do all kinds of weird stuff and you're not going to know why, and that's part of the learning process. And eventually you figure out why it does what it does. And once you figure that out, you'll start to be able to kind of create what you have in mind. But I wouldn't just jump right into it. I think I would plan this and know that you're going to have some time spent with this. This mesh tool is a pretty complicated one. So anyhow, a lot of times what we'll do is, and I'll go into this one tomorrow, but I just want to get some sort of feeling for that mesh tool. But you can find your own. A lot of times we'll be working with a photograph and kind of taking that photo reference from a photograph. So you can use royalty-free sites like pexels.com or unsplash.com to reference, or you can have your own photos. Like I say, you can have as many fruits as you like, but really what I want to do is just go in and kind of explore this mesh tool a little bit. Like, what is it? Why do we have it? So what it does is you can work with these different shapes. And here's just a yellow square. I think this one will be probably more interesting. Let's do a ellipse, make a spear here. So all right, so these are basic shapes that we'll start out with. And I don't know, maybe we can do a purple color or something. Go yellow, purple, complement, very bright purple. Maybe we can dull that purple down a little more so it's not too bright. Maybe even more than that. Desaturate a little bit, make it darker. Yeah, there we go. All right, so we got a couple different colors. Whoops, I should have drug my swatch over in my swatches panel so I can save that. All right, so we've got an object here. It's just, we'll start with this one maybe, just so you can get a feel for it. It's probably good to start with a square just so you get an idea of what's going on. But if I select this tool over here, the mesh tool, or hit U on my keyboard, what we see is if we hover over that object, we'll see this little plus tool, And wherever I click, it's going to put a point. And it's going to, well, let's click. It's going to put a point with lines that are drawn to the side. I put one point in there. I can put another over here. And keeping it simple is the thing. I think maybe this is complex enough because I only clicked twice on this object, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different sections in here. And I have essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 places where I can put color in this. So everywhere we click, we can get another mesh point. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to make this too complicated, because with the mesh tool, keep it simple. That is probably the best single word advice that I can give you. And I think that you hear that a lot in design, but with the mesh tool, I think we can amplify that, because these objects get out of hand and overly complex really fast. So keep it simple. Keep those objects fairly simple in nature, basic shapes, and don't click too many times making too many mesh points, or you'll have an object that's a little too complex for you to use really fast. I mean, you can get complex and build it up, but make sure that you build it really slowly and just keep it as simple as you possibly can. So anyways, what we have here now is a basic grid going on. You see that's grid area, but when I use I can hit A on my keyboard, and that white arrow, direct select tool, basically any of these points that I click on, I can hold my shift key down and click on these 2 points. And we can add a gradient of our purple color in this point and this point, points that I selected. Let's do that. And you can see, wow, look at that thing. It just took this mesh and did a transition as far as it could till it reached another point where there wasn't any other grid lines. So I'm going to undo that. Let's see if I just click on the 1 point instead of 2. We'll go back and click here. It'll go out, it'll draw until it reaches this other point here, and it'll do a gradient. Let's do an undo again. Okay, so let me go back to my mesh tool. I'm going to add another point here. I'll just click once. So now we're going to go back to this direct select. We'll do that same thing. So it'll hit this point. We'll see. See how it gradients out based on where this other mesh guide is. So it's kind of confusing. I admit, I think it's a really confusing tool at time when you first try to use it. But know that you're going to play around with this. Go out and experiment. Even right now, if you're watching the recording, hit the pause button, and you can go out and just set yourself up a couple of really basic shapes and just add some points and pull those different points around. What do you get? You're going to have to experiment with this tool a lot before it starts to make sense, I think. I certainly did. So, we could select a corner point here, a different point. What do I do if I fill that? It just fills the corner. Here we can do this again. Fills the corner. This one here, it ought to go so this will take it as the center point. It's going to go here, transition to this, and transition out to yellow. Let's see that. You can see how we zoom in. So it just takes what is there and then transitions the new color into it. So that's the first aspect of this tool. The other aspect is that you can now, once you have that color in place, pull these grid lines around so you can move them. And sometimes they look like they don't take very much effect. Like, let's see if we move this over here. You get that hard edge with the soft edge there. But this is another aspect. It can get out of control really fast. So you have to watch when you do this stuff. There, I'm not sure what that did. I'm going to hit Command Z a couple of times. Command Z is your friend with this tool as well, but you can see, boy, you get some really strange effects with this really quickly. So, just go play around, see what you get. It almost looks like a hole going into space, but it looks almost 3D kind of. And I can also go back to here and just go with my original yellow. And now we don't have any yellows there, but that kind of looks like almost a black hole. But we're getting some artifacting going on if I do it too far. So I don't know. Sometimes you get unexpected results with this, but again, you just have to go out and play around with it. And yeah, I wouldn't even. Lori mentions hers turned out bad, but that's why don't even think about creating anything at first. Just go out and play around with basic shapes and not create anything. Just see what you get, because that's going to be a lot more fun than actually, I think at first trying to create something might be kind of frustrating because you're going to get a lot of unexpected results. So if I go back to the mesh tool and I can click anywhere, and what Illustrator will do, will try to guess this geometry that's in here. I mean, that put in black. I want maybe some other sort of, like a red might be fun. And anyway, so again, keep it simple and try to do as few actually mesh lines as you can possibly get. And you'll be thankful for that, because these objects in the mesh tool, in the world of mesh, things get complicated really quickly. So the mesh tool is really fun to use with with basic objects for one. Start with just playing around with basic objects, and then use that direct arrow. So the A keyboard and the Command Z are going to be your friends when you're working with this mesh tool. So just go out and make a mess and just try and see what crazy things that you can do with this really quite amazing tool in Illustrator. But make it your objective to just not make anything, but play around with it, make a mess. Don't worry about. Because the reason why I'd recommend not making anything is because you don't want it to. You don't want to get too caught up with making something, because it is going to look bad. Let's fail on purpose and make something look bad on purpose, and just go in and swirl a bunch of colors together like what I'm doing. Maybe try that. That's a good exercise. So, choose a bunch of different colors here, and we'll just mesh them together. So, pull these different handles. You get your points and you get your handles, but know that the A tool on your keyboard, so that direct selection tool, that's going to be your friend. You can also use that group tool, and you can just select. Actually, it's the lasso. That's the other one that I like with the mesh tool, because you can go and select different points like so with that mesh tool or the lasso, and you can select the different mesh points, or they're like anchor points, but they're slightly different because they're mesh points, and you can drag them around. They're very similar to anchor points, but they're like a specific kind of anchor point in Illustrator. So you could look at them as mesh points. Group select, not that useful in this case, but direct select tool. So A on the keyboard, and the other one that you might like is that Q lasso tool, Q on the keyboard. And just, go out. Maybe if you're watching the recording, pause the video now and make a mess with just a really basic object, like a square is a good one to start with, like I got here. And just make some meshes and just, make a mess. Like drag all kinds of colors around and see what these different things do. And don't worry about making anything, or maybe make some abstract piece if you like, but just get a feel for it. So that's the first exercise I'd encourage you to do. But so Lori's mentioning she was trying to color a piece of fruit and mess with it a few hours. That's cool. You can go out and mess with it however you want, really. I would suggest, though, using basic shapes, and you'll just don't worry too much about making something right away. Just make a big mess and learn how that tool functions, and just go out and explore with it a little bit. Because I think if you do that, I think you'll have just generally you'll give yourself permission to fail, right? It's like, I'm not trying to make anything here. I'm just going to go and put mesh points in and make a mess. I'm just going to see how this tool works, right? So white, now we can put in some more white points by just every place we click, we put another mesh point, and it draws all the way from one side to the other. So anyway, I'm kind of having some fun. I mean, this is almost like a fun, like abstract painting almost, but you can see how that those colors transition from whatever you have selected in your fill in the panel here, and then whatever color you can put whatever the background color of the shape is. So that's one way you'd be working with this tool. So tomorrow when we do it, we'll work a little bit more intensively with it and actually work with a photograph that we'll sample colors from, because you'll also be using that. Probably eyedropper tool is another good friend of yours while you're using the mesh tool. Is direct select tool, the lasso, and the eyedropper if you're working from a photo, which is what it was recommended in the assignment. So anyways, yeah, go out and fail on purpose, make a mess, just get a handle of that gradient mesh tool, and know that it's going to take some time in order to get it to the point where you can control it a little bit. So exactly, just go out and play around with it. So anyways, let's go to the next one, which is now let's try to make this look like a spear. Let's try to make it look 3D without actually using the 3D panel. Now if we have to control this gradient mesh a little bit, how might we do that? So I'll use this ellipse tool. We'll just draw this circle here. Hold down the shift key. That will constrain it so that it's a perfect circle rather than an ellipse, right? Ellipse is just kind of a circle like that. You see it, a circle from the side, like a wheel or something, But, maybe go out and try to make a spear. That's what we'll do here. I'm going to think, well, all right, where's the spear? Where's the light coming from? Let's maybe define that first. So let's have a light come from, we'll just make it come from upper left. How about that? So let's see, make a little light here. I'll use the rectangle tool, and then it's not a great light, but it'll work. And I'm gonna go ahead and hit the minus key on my keyboard, and we'll make a light like this. And in fact, what I'll actually do is just select this and hit delete on my keyboard, and then pen tool, we can connect these. And that'll be my imaginary kind of light source here. So I'll fuse those together, and it'll be like the light's coming out. Let's see, we could make a polygon tool for this. Triangle, so the light's kind of coming out like this. I'm hoping it looks more like a light, maybe flashlight. And I can use the gradient tool here and make a gradient transition to white. So see this light now, it looks more real. Yellow light, sure. So there's our so-called light. We can make it a little less intensive, but I'm thinking, so the light, if it was coming from over here on this object here, our spear that we're going to do, we'll make it a little smaller. So it's coming from the upper left. So if this light was hitting this side, we'd have a highlight here. We'd have a shadow side where the light was falling off on the right-hand side of the sphere. And later maybe we'll even add a little cast shadow over here to really uh, bring out that object, make it look more 3D. So anyhow, yeah, this would be a good exercise for our fruit when we're doing that. Pre-visualizing, thinking about where that light's coming from, how is that light hitting the object, where's the highlight, where's the shadow, where's that transition area. So we can use that gradient mesh for that. Why don't we, maybe we'll make a peach or something, like a piece of fruit, maybe I don't know. That's actually, you know what? I'm already doing it. Let me not do that. Let's just make a spear. Let's not even make anything in reality, because that's what I'm trying to get people to do. Focus on one thing at a time. Keep it really simple. Keep it basic. If we're making something in reality, we're already starting to concentrate on something a little bit more than what we need to focus on, which is the real basics. So I just want to make a spear here. We can think of how many pieces of fruit out there are spearized. We can figure oranges, apples, even strawberries, but it's kind of pulled on one end. Many, many, many different fruits out there, too numerous to name, that have a spear quality to them. So we can think about, oh well, how is a spear a basic shape? How are fruits basic spears? We can think about stuff like that, but let's just focus on one thing at a time, and we'll keep this yellow. I'm gonna have probably, I guess I could change the color of the light. That would make sense. Maybe we'll have like blue light. How about orange? That's a warm color. It'll look good. So we'll have orangish light falling on this spear object. All right, so we got the object selected. We'll use the mesh tool, and I'll think, all right, so I've got a highlight. Probably if this light's hitting, I might also think about, is this light in 3D? So I could, again, there's so many ways to complicate things. I don't want to complicate it too much, but you could actually bring the light forward, and you could think, well, I'm going to see if I look at this, I'm kind of seeing the I don't know, the top of the light here. So there'd be, it'd be falling on them. Yeah, just hopefully making the demo a little more interesting. But this is easier when I have a plan, and I can do this in the beginning, but just so we can maybe get a little bit more depth in this than completely flat. I'll just play with this a little bit. Close enough. The trick is, when you know how to get those things a little bit more accurate, is you have them perfectly vertical. So I can work with this shape, this ellipse, much more easily if it's vertical than if it's at that angle. See how much easily I can just drag that out since it's vertical? So that's another Illustrator trick, really. But anyway, you can see how if it's vertical or horizontal, those shape tools work a lot better. And so here, if we're looking at that, the perspective of this, if we're looking at it at this angle, the perspective then would go something more like this. This is a neat tool. I don't want to get too sidetracked here, but the anchor point tool, that little, I don't know, it's like a greater than or less than sign tilted on its side. Well, you can pull out paths like this, which is kind of neat. So that's what we'll do, is we kind of figure, all right, so if the light were coming directly at, from this upper left direction, but now we're actually thinking, well, it's also coming from the front a little bit too. See how I just have that indicated some depth there. So maybe we'll use that as an example, just make it a little bit and add a little bit more depth than they normally would be. So let's see, we use that. I'll pull this light out as well. I don't think that'll do any. Oh yeah, good. It does do something to the gradient. I thought I was going to have to do a radial gradient, but it actually works. It kind of shows what I'm after. You can see now the light, this one's coming straight from the side, right? This one's coming from the side and slightly to the front. You can make little lights like this. Maybe it looks like a thumbtack, I don't know. But just to indicate the direction of the light, I'll use this one. It's a little bit more complex, coming from the front. It's just a tad. All right, so back to my gradient mesh tool. We'll select the gradient mesh with this selected, and I'm imagining, okay, so this light, in fact, I'm going to move this up here a little bit. It's falling just slightly to the front. You know, if it was perfectly on the side, I might have to put my highlight really close to the edge, but since it's more in the front, and put the highlight, I have to guess where that highlight's going to be. But somewhere right in this area here, that's probably where I'll click right where I think that highlight's going to hit. So for my highlight color, once I've clicked on that, whoops, I don't want to get that. I just want to click on that one single anchor point. I'll just call them anchor points for lack of a better word. They're actually called mesh points. Well, I'll just call them mesh points. Why don't I do that? So I'll click on that. I'll take the yellow and go into my color guide. In this case, if I click on yellow and I go, let's see, I want this to be almost white, but maybe not quite white. So we'll click on that. You can see now there's our main, it's kind of highlight point, and that whole spear gets illuminated. But we designed our fruit as well as color it using the gradient mesh. Yes. Yep. So you'll be designing fruit. I just want to show you kind of basically how this tool would work. And you know what? In fact, if it's orange light, you know, I think why don't we keep it yellow light? I don't want to complicate this too much. Maybe we can do a more complex version after this, but we'll see if there's time. So anyhow, let's go back to gradient mesh and we'll add a couple more. If I click on this line, let's see what happens there. Not quite what I had intended. If I click over here in the blank space, again, not bad, but again, not quite what I was after. Blank spaces are going to do different things than than clicking on a line. So if I click on the line, what I get is that just one single line and an anchor point on that existing line. But if I click on a blank space, I get a line both horizontal and vertical. So interestingly enough, I think what I want to do is probably click somewhere over here on the shadow side for now. Let's see what this looks like. This isn't quite as round as I'd like it to be. That's okay. We can always fix this. Let's get another point in here. What I want is like a smooth transition. So I'm going to click maybe one more time and call that good. So rather than pitch black, we might use some of these here for our transition. You know, in the color guide, you know, it's a little bit, am I getting exactly what I want? No, not exactly, but again, this is just one of those things that if we play around with it, we'll eventually get the hang of this tool. And I'm a little bit rusty. I haven't used this tool a whole lot, but I'm just going to work with it, try to create something here that resembles a spear. I can say that word right. So with the lasso tool, the Q tool, we'll just select a bunch of these points that I have in mind to color. That's going to be all the shadow area here. In fact, I probably, actually, when I think about it, probably want this to be the same color as this, so we can put that in there. And go to my lasso tool again. This is not going to look like a great spear already, I can tell. But we'll get something to work. And we'll go, let's see, another one of these. Hey, why isn't it turning? There it goes. Didn't get this in here, my color that I'm after. There we go. So you can see it's kind of a good resemblance of a spear, but we've got some weird, it's not a very smooth spear. And that's just, I need to practice a little bit more with the gradient mesh tool and learn how this works. This is not quite the results that I was after, but that's what we'll do. We'll just play around with this and make mistakes and try to come up with something that maybe resembles. I'm glad I didn't try to do a peach just yet, right? Like I was thinking. I'm glad I'm just still playing around with colors. So, anyways, let me finish this out really quick. Let me just call this. Let's say we do a shadow in here, and it can be same color as the object. Maybe it's black. This doesn't look that great, but if the light's coming this way, this would maybe be tilted. If this is hitting this way, would it be tilted? Or no, it'd be more like this. Kind of drawing kind of imaginary, so it hits on this. Think about the ground level down here. And be something like that. All right, break time. I might do my shadow, something like so. If the light was doing that. And I mean, it's invented. I think I want to make it so that it looks a little bit more real than that, but that would be the direction of the light. So that's how the shadow would cast. I don't know if I like that really dark shadow. We lighten up the shadow a bit. But anyhow, there's our spear, kind of. It's not the best of spears, I know, but I think we kind of get it. Let me add another, maybe a mesh point in here for like a specular highlight, so the pure white. Maybe we'll put another point right in there, and then anyway, specular highlight might be. I'm gonna go back, put 2 more points in here. See, even I have to practice with the mesh tool and getting it right. Oof, whoops, I want to ruin it. But again, it just takes some time to work with it in order to get it right. All right, where was our yellow that we were using? Isn't it that color yellow? I guess not. That's looking a little better. All right. So if I want a mesh point right here, like a little speck highlight, that means specular highlight just means the brightest part of the highlight where the light's directly hitting it. I could go white for that. I might put that in there. So it's this orb is reflecting the light that's, oops. the actual light bulb reflection. That'd be like a specular highlight, they sometimes call that. So I don't know. I'm not really happy with how this circle, the transition, I want to fix that. And I'm a little rusty with that mesh tool, so I'm gonna have to figure out how do I get a smoother gradient transition here. So anyhow, that's just me playing around with the tool, and what I recommend you do. Maybe pause the video now or watch the rest, or just start, maybe watch it in the background, hear my voice in the background, and just play around with that mesh tool, get some different effects, see what it turns out. And don't even worry, like I say, don't worry about making an object. Just get familiar with that tool. Just, make something like a spear is a good object, actually, because I want this to be a rounder, smoother transition. I might have to look up on Google some way, how can I get that rounder transition with the mesh tool? I mean, I know I can get it with the regular gradient. We get that round with a radial gradient, but I want my mesh to work for me. Maybe mesh isn't the best tool. I'm going to have to review that. But I thought I could get a little bit better results, quite honestly, than what I got here, just because this is just too rough. I mean, it looks okay, but it's just not quite what I was going for. So I want what I'm after a little bit more, and that's helping. Okay, and that's I just had to get that one point there, and I'm using my eyedropper in this other area to transition it. Let me see if we get something over here. So there's that. So I could probably work with this a little bit more. That's the one that I want, but not quite getting the effects that I'm after. And you probably won't either. I think you just have to sort of play around with it, like I say, in order to get what you're after. I mean, that's looking a little bit smoother, but now it's a little bit rough up here. So, how do I fix this up here? I just got to keep fiddling with it and know that, here, this is my first thing that I'm after results with. And I'm glad I did not choose to do a fruit, because, we're just doing a spear, a basic object. And I'm not worried about creating realism yet. We're working in the abstract, just a basic shape from a circle to a spear. That's a good exercise. I'd suggest you do that, and this one as well. But playing around with that tool, getting to understand how it works without having the stress of creating a real object, that's what I recommend and how you approach this. So it is a whole different ball game, definitely. One of those things that just takes a while to learn. Go out, experiment, play with it, have fun. I think when you're going for a real object right away and it's the first time using your tool, this is what I think. So, I think you start to stress yourself out and going, oh, that doesn't look like a peach, or that doesn't look like a piece of fruit. If you're just going for a basic, just an orb or a spear, there's it's a little bit more satisfying and gratifying, and there's a little bit less stress on you to create a real object, So that's why I'd suggest just, first going totally abstract and then coming into reality a little bit more with a really basic shape. Create a spear with maybe a shadow, or lose the shadow, whatever you want. Maybe now it's a floating ball. Maybe it's like bouncing ball, like that. But go out and just do a really basic thing. Once you've played with it and made your abstract smudge composition, like I did here, for lack of a better description, go out and just try it now. Try making a spear, see what you get, see what results you get. After that, try a different shape. Try maybe a triangle, see what results you get there. But work with things that are really basic, and we'll actually start working with a piece of fruit tomorrow. So we'll try to bring it to the next level of making something actually look like an object, so look like a piece of fruit. So we'll work on that tomorrow. But let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll return and finish this out when we get back. All right, we're back. Welcome back. All right, make sure that I'm sharing the screen here. So hopefully you go out before you actually try to create anything real. You go and just play around, familiarize yourself with the tool, and figure out how that thing works. So one general rule with that mesh tool is that fewer points is better than one, especially if you're going for like these smooth transitions. Keeping the object simple, so important, but you can see how many grid lines I put in this by clicking multiple times with that grid tool. So, this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 verticals and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 horizontals. So this one, on the contrary, has 1 vertical and 1 horizontal. Again, this one vertical and 1 horizontal. So I only clicked in one place and just selected the right points to make that sort of a smooth transition. But I can see this transition's kind of rough, and that's partly because my mesh object is too complicated. Simple is good with the mesh tool. Again, like I say, it's probably one of the best things you can remember with the mesh tool. Keep it simple. So, how to make this object. So same difference. I just make a sphere, or use the ellipse tool, make a circle. And now I'm going to click once in a key place. So mesh tool, I did that earlier, but I kept trying to build more points, and that's what messed me up. So here we'll just click once, and instead of just like thinking one point at a time, that's what I get here, which I don't know, it can look okay, but I'm after like more of an orb look. So what I'll do is take this lasso tool, Q, and we'll imagine, all right, so light coming from this upper left corner, upper left place. I'll just go in and select, let's see, all of these, make a slightly darker. We can go that dark, make it look more 3D. But you can see, though, just keeping the mesh simple and just selecting a lot of points with, I just used Q, so the lasso tool in this case, to select a bunch of these points. But now it's like, hey, yeah, that's actually working a little bit more. Now, I don't know, it seems like the light on it, maybe I screwed up because the light here would be a little different. It's kind of the same, but this would be the sort of exercise I'd encourage you guys to do, is just go out, see what you come up with. Make a bunch of these things. Try to click in different areas. What do you get if we click over here versus over here? Let's try clicking over there. And now I want the light to look like, the same thing over here, like it's coming from this. Oops, didn't mean to have that point selected. Get another light here. Let's try to control this a little bit. So light's hitting, slightly, the light's slightly in front, so it's going to project that shadow and fall on the object. Project the shadow backwards a little bit since it's in front. I want it to hit right here. I don't know exactly what I'm going to get, but I have to play around with this in order to learn that. So what if I just lasso tooled all of these points? I went to my color guide, the yellow, and just made it just a tad darker. I have to double click on that. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of getting a little bit more what I'm after, but not, well, my key is, what if, let's go. So we try with this point. I can't remember what I did, but this point here, I guess, was my only one that I had selected as yellow. So what if I did this point and this point as that pure yellow? I have to double click twice. Wait, why didn't it? Not getting the results I expected here. I think maybe because that's an anchor point, not a mesh point. I don't know. Let's try it. I'm going to try to add a really foreign color in here. Let's see what it's doing. It's not changing for some reason. I think, well, that's really strange. It's telling me this is a white point. If I overlook in my fill, saying that's white. Is that a bug? I don't know. White point here, white point there. That's telling me. I'm just looking in my fill color when I click on these different points. So that I'm getting right. Getting the right fill color here. But when I click on this, it's telling me it's white. So that's weird. I'm not sure what's going on there. But I ought to be able to put a new color in there. In theory, for some reason, it's not letting me. So anyhow, let me just experiment some more. Mesh tool, U. So we'll click over here. Let's say I'll put another point in here. All right, that's kind of what I want, except the wrong color. And probably a little bit lighter, like maybe this one will work. All right, so we kind of getting there. Highlight and shadow going on. So, all right, so I had to step it up in complexity. I had to add another grid line for the mesh tool. These guys only have a single click, so they have one horizontal, one vertical. This one has multiple, and it's probably the hardest object to work with because it has so many of these points in here. Remember, keeping it simple is the key with the mesh tool. But here we've got this one that I think is kind of coming along. What if we took this lasso tool again, Q, another good tool to have in our arsenal. And actually, I just said, all right, I want all of these points here to be an even darker color. Let's see what that does. Double click. Ah, there we go. And now we're starting to get more spherized. And maybe let's try that one as well. So now it's getting a nice smooth transition. So kind of the happy medium, I guess you could say, was to get a really round looking orb spear was to have two different clicks with the gradient mesh tool gave us 4 different lines, 2 horizontal, 2 vertical. A little bit more complex than these objects, but less complex than this one. You can see, yeah, this is actually more what I'm after. We can maybe put the shadow on that and see. All right, so we got pretty realistic looking, smooth orb. Shadows really bring that effect to it a little bit more. I think what I'd actually do is end up having to distort it somehow. Now I don't want this. I mean, this looks weird, like it's not, like it's on a slanted surface. So what I'd have to do actually is probably pull it like this, bring this in. If it's, I'm thinking, remember, because I'm thinking that light, the back of it's coming from the front a little bit, so I want to project into the back. Might look a little more like this, a little bit less on that side. Anyway, I could also do this. Since we're working with realism, we can go into the gradient and make, sometimes it looks good to have it, the complementary color in the shadow. So we could go here to this, maybe this deep purple or desaturated grayish purple. It goes into white. So my background color. And we'll go, let's see, let's go radial gradient. So my gradient panel radial. Let's flip those. I might have to adjust my shape, make it a little larger here since we got a transition now. And let's see, my gradient annotator tool. So G on the keyboard, click that. We can shape this as we need it. Kind of the same as my shape. I know I want to make it pretty close to that. Anyway, yeah, it's looking good, looking interesting, looking kind of ugly, but getting there. Maybe what I could do, I like that little occlusion shadow, they sometimes call that, where there's no light hitting. Kind of have that, might be a little bigger. The other thing I could do is make multiple things of that, but anyways, yeah, that's how I would go about doing this. Let's make multiple. I'm going to go Command C, Command F, and paste it in front of that. Paste my shadow in front of the other shadow, and go into transparency. This layer blending mode, multiply, so I can just make it darker like that, and a little bit more. I've just got one that's set to multiply now, so I can build up that effect, make it darker that way. So anyhow, kind of like what I'm getting. Fool around with that some more, but there I've got a little bit more realism going on in my first take. So I'm gradually improving by just playing around and seeing what sort of effect I can get. But that looks like a pretty good spear, pretty good orb. And with the shadow, I think it comes together pretty well. So, yeah, I mean, before you go in and try to make an actual piece of fruit, just play around with these basic shapes. You'll be really glad that you did. And it'll both familiarize yourself with the tool and how the light kind of falls on objects, and just, I think you'll get much better results by just playing around with the tool and not having any real stress about having to try to create a real object or even think about your final project at this point, because that's, we'll get to that. But now let's just play around with the tool, get to know it a little bit, get to make some mistakes without feeling any sort of consequence. It's just an orb here. We're not necessarily trying to finalize anything, but I like what I'm getting just based on playing around. I kind of have the medium sort of simplification, building up my object gradually. Here I built it up too fast, and in real life I'd probably just end up trashing this. I wouldn't end up using it. But let's say my real life project was to make an orb or a spear. There, I've got it figured out. I've got the way that transition a little bit more figured out in my mind. We're just selecting anchor points rather than thinking about, adding more mesh lines and points. Just work with those existing anchor points and keep the mesh lines and the mesh points to a minimum. Keep it simple. Generally, probably the best message I can give you as far as working with the gradient mesh tool. Keep it as simple as you can. It gets built up and becomes complex fairly quickly, so keep that in mind. All right, so yeah, do what you can do. I think spending some time, even searching around, like I mentioned earlier. YouTube's a great resource. Vimeo's another one you might want to try. Just Google searches, they'll have a lot of just basic tutorials. Envato, that network of sites, I think it's not Graphic River, but they have one that's just all tutorials, and they'll have the bunch of free ones and then the ones that are subscription tutorials. But You can find all kinds of tutorials on the gradient mesh tool, and I would recommend using this and playing around, but take it to the next level now after you've spent maybe an hour or so creating some just basic pieces with that gradient mesh, and then go out and create some more stuff, get some more tips. Just search those tutorials and see what you can come up with. And do all of that before you start on your assignment, please. You'll be happy you did. That way you're making things without putting that stress on yourself of trying to create an assignment or a final project or even a final piece of fruit that looks real. Let's get to that point later, but start basic. All right, so that's pretty much all I have today. Do you have any questions, Lori? About
No, I'm good. I just have some huge time constraints, as usual. So it's a little stressful for me, but I will always do my best.
Okay, sounds good. That's what you want to do, your best. All
Yeah,
situations, right?
exactly, exactly. And keep a good attitude and persevere and just do the best that I can. So, yeah, I was just practicing on the sphere and it was just like fail, 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 fail. So it's gonna take me quite a while, I think, to get used to this mesh tool.
Yeah, it
It
will.
is
It's
cool.
it's a
It
tough
is
one.
cool. It is very cool, but it's a tough one. I didn't get any further than like your tie-dye-ish looking one, and I was like everything's bending, and then my square and circle became not a square and circle anymore, and I'm like, whoa. So yeah, some interesting things happened, and then every time I use the lasso tool, as soon as I let off my trackpad, it just disappeared. So I don't know if that's something that's normal or whatever, but
They disappear like the points that you got.
yeah. No, not the points. My like if I tried to draw a circle with the lasso tool around a sphere with the lasso tool, my using my lasso tool, drawing a circle around a sphere, as soon as I let go of the trackpad, my lasso tool line disappeared.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, so that'll disappear, but your anchor points or your mesh points, those will be selected. So notice
Yeah,
that.
so it was just, and I think the reason mine got out of shape is because I used the handles, so much to do, um, you know, try to fix it, and then it just got worse. So then I just draw, another circle and start over, try
Yeah.
again. So, but yeah, it's definitely going to take me a while to get a grip on this, that's for sure. But
Yeah, think of doing a lot of start overs, a lot of redos, and that's another thing like
yeah,
why the basic shapes are so good. Like well, that didn't turn out so great. I'll just do another circle and start again. You don't have to worry about, creating fruit and texture and how the shape looks just perfect and how the light hits the peak
right.
just right. And suddenly it's like you've got way too much in mind to just focus on just building up the basics. And so stay basic. Keep it
Exactly.
simple.
It's the KISS method in my
Absolutely.
but
Yep. Keep it
yeah,
simple, student.
exactly, or silly or something. Yeah, yeah. But great lecture, and I will be on again tomorrow at 9:30.
Sounds good. We'll see you then.
Thank you. Thank you, JC. Have a good day.
All right, you too. See ya.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Okay, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Adios.